The Art of Simplicity, Master the Hidden Psychology of Peaceful Living, published by Audiobook Academy. Introduction. Peace rarely enters a life filled with constant noise. A mind that is overloaded with pressure, distraction, comparison, and endless stimulation slowly loses its ability to feel calm, focused, and emotionally clear. Modern life has taught people how to chase more, consume more, rush more, and worry more, yet very few have learned the hidden art of living simply. And without simplicity, even success can begin to feel heavy. Simplicity is not about living without ambition. It is not about avoiding responsibility or rejecting progress. True simplicity is the ability to remove what weakens your peace so you can fully focus on what strengthens your life. It is learning how to create mental clarity in a distracted world, emotional balance in stressful situations, and inner calm in a culture that constantly demands your attention. In this audiobook, we will explore the hidden psychology behind peaceful living and why simplifying your thoughts, habits, environment, relationships, and priorities can completely transform the quality of your life. You will learn why the human mind becomes exhausted from too many decisions, too much noise, and too much emotional clutter. You will discover how attention affects happiness, why calm people protect their energy carefully, and how simple daily routines can create emotional stability over time. This journey is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming lighter, clearer, more intentional. You will learn how to let go of distractions that drain your focus, relationships that disturb your peace, and habits that quietly create stress inside your mind. Because a peaceful life is not built through complexity. It is built through clarity, and sometimes the greatest transformation begins the moment you stop adding more to your life and start removing what no longer belongs there. Chapter 1. Remove the noise from your mind. Noise is not always something you hear. Sometimes it is something you carry inside you all day long. It can sound like unfinished thoughts, constant worry, endless comparison, pressure to keep up, or the feeling that your mind never truly rests. A person can sit alone in a quiet room and still feel mentally overwhelmed, because external silence does not always create internal peace. The modern world has trained people to live in constant stimulation, and over time, many have forgotten what mental clarity actually feels like. Your mind was not designed to process endless information every waking hour, yet many people begin their mornings by reaching for their phones before they even fully wake up. Notifications, headlines, messages, videos, opinions, and distractions start entering the brain within minutes of opening their eyes. Then the day continues with more conversations, more responsibilities, more decisions, and more pressure. By the evening, the mind feels heavy, exhausted, and emotionally crowded, not because life is impossible, but because the brain has been overloaded without rest. This is one of the hidden reasons people feel emotionally drained even when they are doing well in life. Mental clutter quietly steals energy. When your attention is constantly pulled in different directions, your thoughts lose clarity. You become reactive instead of intentional. You start moving through life automatically, without truly feeling present in it. Over time, this creates anxiety, irritability, poor focus, emotional exhaustion, and even a strange feeling of emptiness that is difficult to explain. From the outside, his life looked impressive. He worked with major brands, earned good money, and stayed connected to an exciting professional world. But internally, he felt exhausted almost every day. His phone never stopped vibrating. His mind never stopped racing. Even during dinner, he checked emails. Even while watching television, he scrolled through social media. Silence made him uncomfortable because he had become so used to stimulation that stillness felt unnatural. One evening, after finishing a long work presentation, Ethan sat alone in his apartment and realized he could not remember the last time he had spent a full hour without consuming noise. Music was always playing, notifications were always arriving, screens were always glowing. His brain never had space to breathe. That realization disturbed him more than he expected. So he began making small changes, nothing dramatic at first. He stopped checking his phone during the first 30 minutes of the morning. He started taking short walks without headphones. He removed unnecessary apps that constantly distracted him. He began sitting quietly for a few minutes before bed, instead of ending the night with endless scrolling. Slowly, something started changing inside him. His thinking became clearer. His anxiety softened. He felt calmer during conversations. He became more focused at work even though he was doing less multitasking than before. What Ethan discovered is something many people never fully realize. Clarity is not something you add to your life. It is something you create by removing what overwhelms your mind. A peaceful mind requires space, space to think, space to reflect, space to process emotions without constant interruption. But modern life often fills every empty moment with stimulation, because people have become uncomfortable with quietness. Silence forces reflection, and reflection can feel uncomfortable at first. Yet this discomfort is often where clarity begins. You do not need to escape society to protect your peace. You simply need to become more intentional about what enters your mind every day. Not every notification deserves your attention. Not every opinion deserves your emotional energy. Not every distraction deserves access to your focus. Mental simplicity is a form of self-respect. It is choosing to protect your inner world, instead of allowing endless noise to control it. Because once your mind becomes calmer, your decisions become wiser, your emotions become steadier, your relationships improve, and life itself begins to feel lighter. Peace does not appear all at once. It begins quietly, the moment you stop feeding your mind with unnecessary noise every hour of the day. Chapter 2. Simplify your decisions and save your energy. A tired mind is not always the result of hard work. Sometimes it is the result of too many small decisions made throughout the day. Every choice consumes mental energy, even the ordinary ones people rarely notice. What to wear, what to eat, which message to answer first, which task deserves attention, whether to say yes or no, whether to keep scrolling or finally rest. One decision alone may seem harmless, but hundreds of them slowly drain the brain in ways most people never recognize. This is why some people feel mentally exhausted before the day is even halfway finished. Their minds are constantly switching, evaluating, comparing and deciding without pause. Modern life offers endless options, endless distractions, and endless access to information. While freedom of choice sounds empowering, too many choices can quietly become emotional pressure. The brain becomes overloaded, focus weakens, patience shortens, and even simple responsibilities begin to feel heavier than they actually are. Peaceful living requires more than reducing noise. It also requires reducing unnecessary mental effort. Many people complicate their lives not because they lack intelligence, but because they lack structure. When everything changes every day, the mind never fully relaxes. Unpredictable habits create invisible stress, because the brain is forced to constantly adapt and reorganize itself. Simplicity creates emotional stability, because it removes unnecessary friction from daily life. Claire Donovan learned this lesson after years of feeling constantly drained without understanding why. She was a successful real estate consultant living in Dallas. Her career demanded long hours, constant communication, and endless scheduling. But what exhausted her most was not her work itself. It was the chaos surrounding her daily life. Every morning started differently. She spent too much time choosing clothes, rearranging plans, checking multiple calendars, and constantly deciding what needed attention first. Even simple tasks felt mentally tiring, because nothing in her life had structure. By the time she arrived home in the evening, she felt emotionally depleted. Small inconveniences irritated her more than they should have. She struggled to focus on conversations. Even relaxing became difficult because her mind remained overstimulated from making decisions all day long. One weekend, while visiting her older brother, she noticed something unusual about his lifestyle. His routines were simple and predictable. Meals were planned. His mornings followed the same pattern. His workspace remained organized. He did not waste energy constantly reinventing every part of his day. At first, Claire thought his life looked repetitive, but after spending several days around him, she noticed something else. He seemed calm, clear-minded, emotionally steady. While her own brain constantly felt crowded, his mind appeared relaxed and focused. That experience changed the way she viewed simplicity. When she returned home, she began simplifying small areas of her life. She organized her mornings around a consistent routine. She reduced unnecessary shopping decisions. She planned meals in advance. She stopped overcommitting her schedule. She created specific hours for work, rest, and personal time, instead of constantly blending everything together. None of these changes were dramatic individually, but together they transformed the way she felt emotionally.
This is one of the hidden powers of simplicity. Small systems protect mental energy. When certain parts of life become automatic, the brain gains more space for meaningful thinking, creativity, and emotional balance. This is why many calm and productive people often repeat simple routines. It is not because they lack spontaneity. It is because they understand the value of preserving mental clarity. Many people waste enormous amounts of emotional energy on decisions that do not truly improve their lives.
They overanalyze tiny details, constantly seek perfect options, and mentally exhaust themselves trying to optimize everything. But perfection is mentally expensive. Simplicity is emotionally sustainable. You do not need to control every detail of your life to feel peaceful. In fact, the opposite is often true. The more unnecessary decisions you remove, the lighter your mind becomes. Structure creates freedom because it reduces chaos. Simple routines create emotional stability because they allow the mind to rest from constant problem solving. This also applies to bigger areas of life. People often delay important decisions because they keep searching for perfect certainty. They endlessly compare options, replay possibilities, and overthink outcomes. But overthinking rarely creates peace. It usually creates paralysis. Sometimes clarity appears only after action begins. A peaceful life is not built by making life more complicated. It is built by reducing unnecessary friction. You do not need more choices to feel free. Sometimes you need fewer distractions, fewer commitments, and fewer decisions pulling your mind in different directions. Your energy is valuable, your attention is limited, and your emotional peace depends heavily on how wisely you use both. The simpler your systems become, the calmer your mind becomes. And when the mind is calm, life feels far more manageable than it once did. Chapter 3. Stop chasing more and learn to feel enough. An endless desire for more can quietly steal the ability to enjoy what already exists. More money, more recognition, more success, more possessions, more approval, more achievements. The human mind naturally wants improvement, and ambition itself is not the problem. Growth can be healthy, progress can be meaningful, but a dangerous shift happens when a person begins believing that peace only exists somewhere in the future. At that point, life becomes a permanent chase, instead of something that can actually be experienced. Modern culture constantly teaches people to feel incomplete. Everywhere you look, someone appears richer, happier, more attractive, more successful, or more accomplished. The mind absorbs these comparisons even when people pretend they are unaffected by them. Slowly, satisfaction disappears because attention becomes fixed on what is missing instead of what is already valuable. A person can build an impressive life and still feel emotionally poor because their mind has been trained to focus only on what they have not yet reached. This emotional trap is exhausting because the finish line keeps moving. Once one goal is achieved, another immediately appears, then another, and another. The mind says, I will finally relax after this next achievement. But peace keeps getting postponed. Years pass this way. Life becomes filled with pressure, striving, and comparison, while gratitude quietly disappears in the background. Marcus Reed understood this pattern better than anyone. He was a corporate attorney living in New York City, known for his intelligence, confidence, and relentless work ethic. His career moved quickly. Expensive suits, luxury apartments, exclusive restaurants, and major financial success became normal parts of his life before he turned 40. People admired him constantly. From the outside, he appeared to have everything many people dream about. But internally, Marcus felt strangely restless. No achievement ever felt satisfying for very long. Every promotion only increased the pressure for another one. Every expensive purchase created temporary excitement followed by emotional emptiness. Even vacations became opportunities to impress people rather than moments to genuinely rest. Without realizing it, He had built his identity around constant achievement and external validation. One evening, after attending a corporate networking event, Marcus returned home exhausted. He sat alone in his luxury apartment overlooking the city skyline and realized something uncomfortable. He had spent years building a successful life, yet he could not remember the last time he truly felt content, not excited, not distracted, not entertained, truly content. That realization stayed with him for weeks. He began noticing how often his mind automatically compared itself to others. Someone always seemed richer. Someone always seemed more successful. No matter how much he accomplished, his mind kept searching for another standard to chase. For the first time, he questioned whether the problem was not his lack of success, but his inability to appreciate enough. Slowly, Marcus began changing the way he lived. He reduced unnecessary spending that had become tied to status instead of enjoyment. He spent less time trying to impress people and more time reconnecting with simple experiences he once loved. Quiet dinners, morning walks, reading without distraction, conversations without checking his phone every few minutes. He stopped measuring every part of life through achievement. What surprised him most was not how much he lost, but how much emotional pressure disappeared when he stopped trying to constantly prove himself. The mind becomes calmer when it no longer depends on endless external rewards for happiness. This does not mean giving up goals or ambition. It means learning how to pursue success without attaching your entire emotional well-being to it. There is a major difference between wanting more and believing you are nothing without more. A peaceful life requires gratitude because gratitude interrupts the endless cycle of dissatisfaction. When the mind learns to recognize enough, emotional stability becomes possible. People who constantly feel deprived often overlook how much they already possess: health, time, relationships, freedom, safety, small daily comforts. These things become invisible when the mind is obsessed with chasing larger desires. Simplicity teaches a powerful truth. Happiness often becomes clearer when unnecessary desires become quieter. The more the mind constantly craves, the less it appreciates. But when a person learns to slow down and value ordinary moments again, life begins to feel fuller in unexpected ways. This is why some of the calmest people are not necessarily the wealthiest or most famous. They simply learned how to stop measuring their worth against everyone else. They stopped building their identity around constant comparison. They learned how to enjoy what they already had while still growing forward with purpose. Enough is not a number, it is a mindset. And once a person truly understands that, life becomes far lighter than before. Chapter 4. Clear your space and calm your life. The condition of your environment quietly affects the condition of your mind. A cluttered room may not seem dangerous at first, but over time, physical disorder creates mental pressure in ways people often underestimate. Every unfinished pile, crowded corner, misplaced object, and chaotic space sends small signals to the brain. Individually, these signals seem harmless. Together, they create invisible stress that slowly drains emotional energy. This is why some spaces instantly make you feel calm, while others make you feel mentally tired. The brain is constantly absorbing information from the environment around you. When your surroundings feel crowded, your attention becomes crowded too. The mind struggles to fully relax because part of it remains aware of the disorder surrounding it. Even when people try to ignore clutter, the brain continues processing it quietly in the background. Modern life encourages accumulation. People buy more, store more, save more, and keep more than they actually need. Closets overflow, workspaces become chaotic, digital devices become filled with endless files, photos, tabs, and notifications. Schedules become overloaded, the same way physical spaces do. Eventually, life begins to feel heavy, not because of one major problem, but because too many small things have been left unmanaged for too long. Natalie Brooks understood this heaviness deeply. She was a freelance photographer living in Seattle, creative and talented, but constantly overwhelmed by her own environment. Her apartment was filled with unfinished projects, unopened packages, scattered paperwork, camera equipment, laundry, and random belongings she kept promising herself she would organize later. At the same time, her calendar looked just as chaotic. Missed appointments, unfinished editing work, financial stress, and constant mental clutter followed her everywhere. Even on days when nothing particularly bad happened, Natalie still felt anxious and emotionally exhausted. She blamed work pressure at first, but eventually she realized something important. Her environment itself was making it difficult for her mind to feel calm. Every room reminded her of unfinished responsibilities. Every pile represented delayed decisions. Every crowded space quietly pulled on her attention. One rainy Saturday morning, after searching nearly 20 minutes for an important memory card she needed for a client project, Natalie finally broke down in frustration. Sitting on the floor surrounded by clutter, she admitted something to herself she had avoided for years. Her life no longer felt peaceful because nothing around her felt clear. That day became a turning point. She did not try to change everything overnight. Instead, she focused on one small area at a time. One shelf, one drawer, one corner of her apartment. As she removed unnecessary belongings, something unexpected began happening internally. Her mind felt lighter. Cleaning her environment created a strange emotional release she had not expected. It was not simply about organization. It was about removing visual chaos that had been exhausting her nervous system for years. Over the following months, Natalie simplified more than just her apartment. She simplified her schedule. She stopped saying yes to projects that drained her energy. She reduced unnecessary commitments. She deleted digital clutter from her devices. The more space she created around herself, the calmer her thinking became. Lord, this is one of the hidden psychological effects of simplicity. External order supports internal peace. When your environment feels intentional, your mind feels safer and more grounded. The brain relaxes because it no longer needs to process constant visual and emotional overload. Many people believe they will feel peaceful once life becomes less stressful. But often peace begins when a person finally creates an environment that supports calmness instead of chaos. Your surroundings shape your habits, your focus, your emotional state, and even your ability to think clearly. Look, this does not mean your home must look perfect. Peaceful living is not about perfection or expensive aesthetics. It is about creating spaces that allow you to breathe mentally, spaces where your attention is not constantly pulled in different directions. Spaces that support rest instead of stimulation. The same principle applies emotionally. Unfinished conversations, unresolved stress, and delayed responsibilities create mental clutter, just as physical objects do. The mind becomes crowded when too many things remain emotionally unprocessed. Simplifying life often requires learning how to close open loops instead of endlessly carrying them. A peaceful environment sends a quiet message to the mind. You are safe here. You can slow down here. You do not need to constantly brace yourself for chaos. And sometimes, one of the most powerful forms of self-care is simply removing what no longer belongs in your space, your schedule, or your life. Because when your surroundings become lighter, your inner world often follows the same direction. Chapter 5. Protect your attention from constant distraction. Attention is one of the most valuable forms of energy you possess. Whatever consistently receives your attention slowly shapes your emotions, your habits, your thoughts, and eventually your entire life. Yet many people give their attention away carelessly every single day without realizing the long-term cost. Endless scrolling, constant notifications, background noise, entertainment overload, and non-stop stimulation quietly train the mind to become restless and unfocused. Over time, this weakens not only productivity, but emotional peace itself. A distracted mind struggles to feel fulfilled because it rarely stays present long enough to deeply experience anything. Conversations become shallow because attention keeps drifting elsewhere. Work feels exhausting because focus constantly breaks apart. Even moments of rest lose their calming effect because the brain remains overstimulated. Many people believe they are relaxing when they consume endless entertainment, but mentally, they are often just continuing the cycle of stimulation in a different form. The modern world profits from distraction. Every app, platform, and notification competes aggressively for human attention because attention creates engagement, and engagement creates profit. As a result, people now live in environments specifically designed to interrupt focus. The brain never fully settles because something is always flashing, vibrating, updating, or demanding immediate response. This constant fragmentation slowly trains the mind to crave novelty instead of depth. Daniel Harper experienced this without understanding what was happening to him. He was a software developer living in Austin, intelligent and highly capable, but increasingly frustrated with himself. Every morning he created detailed plans for the day, yet by evening he often felt like he had accomplished very little. His attention constantly drifted between emails, social media, videos, messages, and random internet searches. Even while working, he kept checking his phone every few minutes without thinking about it. At first, Daniel blamed laziness, but the deeper problem was not laziness at all. His mind had simply become conditioned for distraction. Long periods of focus felt uncomfortable because his brain had adapted to constant stimulation. The smallest interruption immediately pulled his attention away. Over time, this began affecting more than his work. He struggled to enjoy books, conversations, and even simple quiet moments because his mind expected continuous input at all times. In less than 1 hour, he had switched between tasks more than 20 times. Messages, tabs, notifications, random thoughts, and distractions constantly interrupted his concentration. By the end of the day, he felt mentally exhausted despite barely making progress. That realization forced him to confront something difficult. His attention was no longer under his control, so he began making changes slowly and intentionally. He turned off unnecessary notifications. He stopped sleeping beside his phone. He created blocks of uninterrupted work time without checking messages. During meals, he stopped watching videos and simply ate in silence. At first, these changes felt uncomfortable. His mind kept searching for stimulation because it had become addicted to constant distraction. But after several weeks, something started shifting. His focus became stronger. Conversations felt more meaningful. He experienced less anxiety throughout the day. Tasks that once felt mentally exhausting became easier because his attention remained steady instead of constantly scattered. For the first time in years, he felt mentally present again. This is the hidden power of protecting your attention. Focus creates calmness because the mind stops constantly jumping between different sources of stimulation. A focused mind experiences life more deeply. It thinks more clearly, listens more carefully, and responds more intentionally. Distraction, on the other hand, creates emotional fragmentation. The brain becomes overstimulated, impatient, and mentally fatigued. Many people underestimate how deeply distraction affects emotional health. Constant interruptions reduce the brain's ability to tolerate stillness. This is why many people now struggle to sit quietly without immediately reaching for a screen. Silence feels uncomfortable because the mind has lost its tolerance for simplicity, but peace requires attention. You cannot fully enjoy a moment you are barely present for. You cannot build meaningful relationships while constantly distracted. You cannot hear your own thoughts clearly when your mind is crowded with non-stop input from the outside world. Protecting your attention does not mean rejecting technology completely. It means becoming intentional about what deserves access to your mind. Not everything needs an immediate response. Not every update deserves your emotional energy, and not every distraction deserves your focus simply because it appears in front of you. Attention is life itself directed towards something. Whatever consistently controls your attention slowly controls your experience of life. This is why peaceful people guard their focus carefully. They understand that clarity, creativity, emotional balance, and inner calm all depend on the ability to direct attention intentionally, instead of allowing the world to constantly pull it away. The calmer your attention becomes, the quieter your inner world becomes, and in that quietness, life begins to feel meaningful again. Chapter 8. Slow down before life passes you by. Speed has become one of the most admired habits in modern life. People rush through conversations, meals, work, relationships, and even moments that were meant to be enjoyed. Busyness is often treated like proof of importance, while slowing down is mistaken for laziness or lack of ambition. As a result, many people move through life so quickly that they rarely feel fully present inside it. Their bodies keep moving, but their minds never truly arrive anywhere. A constantly rushed life creates a constantly rushed mind. The nervous system stays alert, impatient, and overstimulated because it never receives enough time to recover. Even moments of rest become rushed. People watch shows while checking their phones. They eat while answering emails. They spend time with loved ones while mentally worrying about the next task waiting for them. Gradually, life becomes something they are trying to manage instead of something they are actually experiencing. The danger of chronic busyness is not only exhaustion, it is disconnection. When people move too fast for too long, they lose their ability to notice simple moments that once brought peace. Their attention remains trapped in future responsibilities, unfinished tasks, and endless urgency. Over time, this creates emotional numbness because the mind never slows down long enough to feel grounded. Olivia Carter knew this feeling well. She was a travel nurse based in Los Angeles, constantly moving between hospitals, schedules, flights, and temporary apartments. Her life looked productive from the outside. She earned good money, stayed busy, and rarely stopped moving. But internally she felt emotionally disconnected from herself. Every week felt rushed. Days blended together. Even when she had free time, her mind stayed restless because she had become addicted to motion. Olivia believed slowing down would make her fall behind. She filled every moment with activity because silence and stillness made her uncomfortable. If she was not working, she distracted herself with entertainment, social media, errands, or unnecessary plans. Deep down, she feared that if she stopped moving, she would finally feel how emotionally exhausted she really was. One evening after a particularly difficult shift at work, Olivia drove to the beach simply because she could not handle another crowded indoor space. She sat in her car watching the ocean as the sun slowly disappeared into the horizon. For the first time in months, there was no noise around her except waves and wind, no rushing, no schedules, no pressure to multitask, and something unexpected happened. She realized how long it had been since she had fully experienced a quiet moment without trying to escape it. That night stayed with her. Over the next several months, Olivia began changing the pace of her life in small but meaningful ways. She stopped overscheduling her free days. She started taking walks without listening to anything. She ate meals more slowly instead of rushing through them while distracted. She spent less time trying to constantly optimize every hour of her day. Gradually, her anxiety decreased. She felt emotionally present again in a way she had not experienced for years. Slowing down does not mean becoming unproductive. In fact, many people become mentally clearer and emotionally healthier once they stop living in constant urgency. The mind functions better when it has space to breathe. Creativity improves, patience grows, relationships deepen because attention becomes more present instead of scattered. A slower life also reveals an uncomfortable truth. Many people stay busy because busyness distracts them from themselves. Constant motion prevents reflection. It keeps difficult emotions buried beneath endless activity. But peace cannot grow in a life where the mind never pauses long enough to understand itself. This is why stillness feels uncomfortable at first for many people. The moment external distractions disappear, unresolved thoughts and emotions begin rising to the surface. Yet this discomfort is often the beginning of emotional healing. A person cannot build a peaceful life while constantly running from silence. There is also a difference between movement and progress. A rushed life may look productive from the outside, while internally creating exhaustion, emotional imbalance, and disconnection. Simplicity teaches you to focus less on speed and more on presence, to fully experience your mornings instead of racing through them, to truly listen during conversations instead of mentally preparing for the next task, to allow life to feel lived instead of merely completed. The world will always encourage you to move faster. There will always be another notification, another responsibility, another pressure demanding your attention. But not every moment deserves urgency. Some moments deserve awareness. Peace often enters quietly when life slows down enough for the mind to finally notice it. And sometimes, the most important thing you can do for your emotional well-being is simply stop rushing through your own existence. Chapter 8. Slow down before life passes you by. Speed has become one of the most admired habits in modern life. People rush through conversations, meals, work, relationships, and even moments that were meant to be enjoyed. Busyness is often treated like proof of importance, while slowing down is mistaken for laziness or lack of ambition. As a result, many people move through life so quickly that they rarely feel fully present inside it. Their bodies keep moving, but their minds never truly arrive anywhere. A constantly rushed life creates a constantly rushed mind. The nervous system stays alert, impatient, and overstimulated because it never receives enough time to recover. Even moments of rest become rushed. People watch shows while checking their phones. They eat while answering emails. They spend time with loved ones while mentally worrying about the next task waiting for them. Gradually, life becomes something they are trying to manage instead of something they are actually experiencing. The danger of chronic busyness is not only exhaustion, it is disconnection. When people move too fast for too long, they lose their ability to notice simple moments that once brought peace. Their attention remains trapped in future responsibilities, unfinished tasks, and endless urgency. Over time, this creates emotional numbness because the mind never slows down long enough to feel grounded. Olivia Carter knew this feeling well. She was a travel nurse based in Los Angeles, constantly moving between hospitals, schedules, flights, and temporary apartments. Her life looked productive from the outside. She earned good money, stayed busy, and rarely stopped moving. But internally she felt emotionally disconnected from herself. Every week felt rushed. Days blended together. Even when she had free time, her mind stayed restless because she had become addicted to motion. Olivia believed slowing down would make her fall behind. She filled every moment with activity because silence and stillness made her uncomfortable. If she was not working, she distracted herself with entertainment, social media, errands, or unnecessary plans. Deep down, she feared that if she stopped moving, she would finally feel how emotionally exhausted she really was. One evening, after a particularly difficult shift at work, Olivia drove to the beach simply because she could not handle another crowded indoor space. She sat in her car watching the ocean as the sun slowly disappeared into the horizon. For the first time in months, there was no noise around her except waves and wind, no rushing, no schedules, no pressure to multitask, and something unexpected happened. She realized how long it had been since she had fully experienced a quiet moment without trying to escape it. That night stayed with her. Over the next several months, Olivia began changing the pace of her life in small but meaningful ways. She stopped overscheduling her free days. She started taking walks without listening to anything. She ate meals more slowly instead of rushing through them while distracted. She spent less time trying to constantly optimize every hour of her day. Gradually, her anxiety decreased. She felt emotionally present again in a way she had not experienced for years. Slowing down does not mean becoming unproductive. In fact, many people become mentally clearer and emotionally healthier once they stop living in constant urgency. The mind functions better when it has space to breathe. Creativity improves, patience grows, relationships deepen because attention becomes more present instead of scattered. A slower life also reveals an uncomfortable truth. Many people stay busy because busyness distracts them from themselves. Constant motion prevents reflection. It keeps difficult emotions buried beneath endless activity. But peace cannot grow in a life where the mind never pauses long enough to understand itself. This is why stillness feels uncomfortable at first for many people. The moment external distractions disappear, unresolved thoughts and emotions begin rising to the surface. Yet this discomfort is often the beginning of emotional healing. A person cannot build a peaceful life while constantly running from silence. There is also a difference between movement and progress. A rushed life may look productive from the outside, while internally creating exhaustion, emotional imbalance, and disconnection. Simplicity teaches you to focus less on speed and more on presence, to fully experience your mornings instead of racing through them, to truly listen during conversations instead of mentally preparing for the next task, to allow life to feel lived instead of merely completed. The world will always encourage you to move faster. There will always be another notification, another responsibility, another pressure demanding your attention. But not every moment deserves urgency. Some moments deserve awareness. Peace often enters quietly when life slows down enough for the mind to finally notice it. And sometimes, the most important thing you can do for your emotional well-being is simply stop rushing through your own existence. Chapter 9. Build daily rituals that keep you grounded. A peaceful life is rarely created through dramatic changes. More often it is built through small daily behaviors repeated consistently over time. The human mind craves stability more than people realize. When life feels emotionally chaotic, simple routines can quietly restore a sense of order and calmness. This is why certain habits, even very ordinary ones, have the power to steady the mind during stressful seasons of life. Daily rituals are different from random habits. A ritual carries intention. It creates emotional structure. It tells the mind, this is where we slow down. This is where we reconnect. This is where we regain balance. Without these grounding moments, life can begin to feel unpredictable and emotionally scattered because the nervous system never fully settles into rhythm. But emotional stability is easier to maintain than it is to rebuild after burnout. Small, consistent routines protect the mind from unnecessary chaos. They create familiarity in a world filled with constant change. Samuel Hayes discovered this during one of the most difficult periods of his life. He was a high school history teacher living in Boston, respected by students and co-workers, but privately struggling with anxiety and emotional exhaustion. His days felt inconsistent and mentally draining. Some mornings he woke up motivated. Other mornings he felt completely scattered before the day even began. His sleep schedule constantly changed. Meals happened at random times. Even his evenings lacked structure because he spent most nights mindlessly scrolling on his phone until he finally fell asleep exhausted. Over time, Samuel noticed that his emotional state became increasingly unstable. Small problems overwhelmed him more easily. His focus weakened. He constantly felt behind in life, even when nothing serious was actually wrong. He kept searching for big solutions to fix his stress, but nothing lasted because the foundation of his daily life remained chaotic. One winter morning, after arriving late to work again because he overslept, Samuel sat alone in his classroom feeling frustrated with himself. He realized something important in that quiet moment. He did not need a completely different life. He needed a steadier rhythm. So he began making simple changes. Every morning, he woke up at the same time and spent 10 quiet minutes reading before checking his phone. He started preparing simple meals instead of constantly eating under stress. In the evenings, he began taking short walks around his neighborhood before bed. He created a rule for himself to stop using screens 1 hour before sleeping. None of these routines were dramatic, but they slowly changed the emotional atmosphere of his life. After several weeks, Samuel noticed his anxiety becoming less intense. His mornings felt calmer. His thoughts felt clearer. Even difficult days became more manageable because his routines created stability underneath the stress. For the first time in years, he felt emotionally grounded instead of mentally scattered. They calm the nervous system by reducing unpredictability. The brain relaxes when it knows certain moments of the day will remain steady and familiar. This is why people often feel comforted by simple routines during uncertain times. Rituals provide emotional anchors when life feels unstable. Modern life often encourages inconsistency. Sleep schedules constantly change. Attention jumps endlessly between distractions. Meals become rushed. Rest becomes irregular. Over time, the body and mind lose rhythm. People begin feeling emotionally disconnected not because they are weak, but because their daily habits no longer support balance. Peaceful living requires structure, because the mind functions best when life contains moments of consistency. A calm morning routine can shape the emotional tone of an entire day. A quiet evening ritual can help release mental tension before sleep. Even simple habits like making tea slowly, journaling for a few minutes, walking outside, or sitting quietly without stimulation can create emotional steadiness over time. The power of rituals also comes from repetition. Small actions repeated daily begin shaping identity. A person who consistently creates peaceful moments trains the mind to return to calmness more naturally. Emotional resilience grows gradually through these ordinary patterns. Many people underestimate how deeply their routines affect their mental state. They focus only on major life events, while ignoring the daily habits quietly shaping their emotions every single day. But a chaotic life is often built through chaotic patterns, and a peaceful life is usually built through intentional ones. You do not need a perfect routine to feel grounded. You simply need a few consistent practices that reconnect you to yourself. Rituals remind the mind that life is not only about productivity, pressure, and endless responsibility. There must also be moments of stillness, reflection, and care woven into daily existence. Because in the end, peace is not something you occasionally visit. It is something you slowly build through the quiet habits you choose to repeat every day. Chapter 10. Own less and live with greater freedom. People often believe that owning more will make life feel more secure, more impressive, or more fulfilling. A bigger house, newer devices, more clothes, more decorations, more purchases, more upgrades. For a short time, acquiring something new can create excitement because the brain enjoys novelty, but that feeling rarely lasts. Soon the new possession becomes normal, and the mind begins searching for the next thing to buy. Without realizing it, many people enter a cycle where consumption becomes emotional compensation. Modern culture constantly encourages this behavior. Advertisements quietly convince people that happiness is always one purchase away. Social comparison strengthens the pressure even further. People begin attaching identity to possessions because they want to feel successful, admired, or emotionally complete. But over time, excessive ownership often creates the opposite effect. Instead of feeling freer, people feel heavier, more debt, more clutter, more maintenance, more stress, more attachment. Possessions themselves are not the problem. A comfortable home, useful tools, meaningful objects, and beautiful spaces can absolutely improve life. The problem begins when ownership becomes emotional dependence. When people start believing their value depends on what they own, simplicity disappears and emotional pressure quietly takes its place. Jennifer Collins learned this slowly over many years. She was an interior designer living in Miami, highly creative and deeply influenced by beauty and aesthetics. Her social media presence showcased elegant furniture, luxury decor, designer clothing, and carefully curated spaces. People admired her lifestyle constantly, but behind the polished appearance, Jennifer felt overwhelmed almost every day. Her apartment was beautiful, but crowded with expensive items she barely used. Closets overflowed with clothing she continued buying out of habit rather than need. Packages arrived weekly. Credit card balances quietly increased. She kept telling herself that once everything looked perfect, she would finally feel relaxed and fulfilled. But peace never arrived. Instead, the pressure kept growing. Even maintaining her lifestyle became emotionally exhausting. Cleaning took longer. Organizing became stressful. Financial anxiety quietly followed her despite her outward success. The strange part was that she still continued shopping whenever she felt emotionally drained, because buying new things temporarily distracted her from the deeper emptiness she did not want to confront. One afternoon, while searching for an important document buried beneath piles of unnecessary belongings, Jennifer suddenly felt emotionally exhausted by everything around her. Her apartment no longer felt peaceful. It felt crowded, demanding, and mentally loud. Standing in the middle of her living room, she realized something difficult. She owned many beautiful things, but very few of them were actually improving her life anymore. That realization changed the way she viewed simplicity. Jennifer began slowly removing what no longer served a meaningful purpose. She donated clothes she never wore. She stopped impulsive shopping habits. She simplified her living space until it finally felt breathable again. At first, the process felt emotionally uncomfortable because so much of her identity had become connected to what she owned. But gradually, she noticed something unexpected. The less she carried physically, the lighter she felt emotionally. Her home became easier to maintain. Her finances became less stressful. Her mind became calmer because her environment no longer overwhelmed her attention. Most importantly, she stopped seeking emotional fulfillment through constant consumption. This is one of the hidden freedoms of simplicity. Owning less often creates more mental clarity, more emotional space, and more appreciation for what truly matters. The brain relaxes when life becomes less crowded with unnecessary possessions demanding attention, maintenance, and emotional attachment. Many people spend years accumulating things without asking whether those things are actually adding peace to their lives. Sometimes possessions quietly become responsibilities disguised as rewards. Every item owned requires some level of mental energy. It must be cleaned, organized, maintained, protected, stored, or emotionally valued. Over time, excessive ownership can create invisible emotional weight. Simplicity teaches a different way of living. Instead of constantly asking, "What else can I add?" it encourages asking, "What no longer belongs here?" This shift changes everything. A person begins choosing quality over quantity, meaning over excess, intention over impulse. Minimalism is not about deprivation. It is about clarity. It is understanding that freedom increases when unnecessary attachment decreases. Peaceful living does not require living with almost nothing. It simply requires becoming honest about what genuinely improves your life and what merely distracts you temporarily. The more people depend on possessions for emotional fulfillment, the harder it becomes to feel content. But when identity no longer depends on ownership, life becomes lighter, gratitude deepens, financial pressure decreases, attention returns to experiences, relationships, health, purpose, and inner peace instead of constant accumulation. In the end, true richness is not measured by how much a person owns. It is measured by how little they need in order to feel calm, fulfilled, and emotionally free. Chapter 11. Stop trying to control everything. One of the greatest sources of anxiety is the illusion that peace comes from controlling every outcome. Many people spend enormous emotional energy trying to manage situations, predict problems, control opinions, prevent uncertainty, and force life into perfect order. At first, this behavior may appear responsible or organized, but underneath it often lives fear. Fear of failure, fear of disappointment, fear of uncertainty, fear of losing stability. The problem is that life does not fully cooperate with human control. Plans change, people behave unpredictably, unexpected problems appear without warning. No amount of overthinking can eliminate uncertainty completely. Yet many people continue exhausting themselves mentally by trying to control things that were never fully within their power to begin with. It keeps scanning for possible problems, preparing for worst-case scenarios, and replaying situations repeatedly. Over time, this creates chronic stress because the nervous system never truly relaxes. Even during calm moments, the mind continues searching for something that might go wrong. Michael Turner understood this pattern deeply. He was an airline operations manager, living in Atlanta, responsible for coordinating schedules, staff communication, and time-sensitive decisions every day. His job required precision and problem-solving, and over the years that mindset slowly expanded into every part of his personal life as well. Michael planned everything carefully. He became frustrated when situations changed unexpectedly. Delays irritated him intensely. If people did not respond quickly enough, his mind immediately imagined problems. He replayed conversations repeatedly, worried excessively about future possibilities, and struggled to relax unless everything felt perfectly organized and predictable. From the outside, he looked highly disciplined and responsible. Internally, however, he felt constantly tense. Even during vacations, he checked emails obsessively. He struggled to sleep because his mind continued planning tomorrow's problems before tomorrow even arrived. He believed his anxiety came from responsibility, but eventually he realized something deeper. He was not simply managing life, he was trying to control life completely. One evening, after a flight delay caused major disruptions at work, Michael found himself overwhelmed with frustration over circumstances he could not change. Sitting alone in his office long after everyone else had gone home, he noticed how exhausted he felt mentally, not just from work itself, but from the endless pressure he placed on himself to keep everything under control all the time. That moment forced him to ask an uncomfortable question. What if my need for control is the very thing stealing my peace? The question stayed with him. Gradually, Michael began changing small behaviors. He stopped checking work messages late at night. When unexpected situations happened, he practiced pausing before reacting emotionally. Instead of obsessively preparing for every possible outcome, he focused only on what he could realistically influence in the present moment. At first, this felt terrifying, because uncertainty had always made him anxious. But over time, something surprising happened. His mind became quieter. He realized that many of his worries never actually happened. He noticed how much emotional energy he had wasted trying to mentally control situations far beyond his reach. The more he accepted uncertainty instead of fighting it constantly, the calmer he became emotionally. This is one of the deepest lessons of peaceful living. Control is limited, but adaptability creates resilience. People often believe peace comes from perfect certainty, but life rarely offers certainty for very long. Peace comes instead from learning how to remain emotionally steady even when uncertainty exists. A flexible mind suffers less than a rigid one, because it does not collapse every time life changes unexpectedly. Trying to control everything also damages relationships. People become impatient when others fail to behave according to their expectations. They struggle to trust because they constantly anticipate disappointment. Over time, the need for control creates emotional distance because genuine connection requires openness, flexibility, and acceptance of imperfection. Simplicity teaches a different approach. Instead of trying to dominate every outcome, it encourages focusing on what truly belongs within your control: your choices, your mindset, your actions, your habits, and your responses. Everything else must eventually be met with some level of trust, patience, and emotional flexibility. This does not mean becoming careless or passive. Responsible people still plan carefully and think ahead, but there is a difference between healthy preparation and obsessive control. One creates stability, the other creates exhaustion. Life will always contain unknowns. No person can fully control the future, other people, or every unexpected event, but a person can learn how to meet uncertainty without panic. That ability creates emotional freedom. The mind becomes lighter when it stops carrying responsibilities that were never meant to belong to it. And often peace begins the moment you finally stop trying to force life into perfect certainty and instead learn how to move through uncertainty with calmness, trust, and quiet resilience. Chapter 12. Focus on what truly matters. A distracted life is not always caused by laziness. Sometimes it is caused by trying to pursue too many things at once. Modern culture encourages constant ambition, more goals, more opportunities, more projects, more achievements. People are told they should maximize every area of life simultaneously, build a successful career, maintain perfect health, grow financially, stay socially active, learn constantly, travel often, remain productive at all times. Eventually the mind becomes overwhelmed, not because it lacks ability, but because its energy has been divided in too many directions. When everything feels important, nothing receives full attention. A person begins many things but struggles to feel deeply connected to any of them. Goals become scattered, focus weakens, emotional exhaustion increases. Over time, even meaningful ambitions start feeling heavy, because the mind never fully commits itself to what matters most. Peaceful living requires clarity about priorities. Not every opportunity deserves pursuit. Not every goal deserves equal energy. Simplicity is not only about removing physical clutter or distractions, it is also about removing unnecessary ambition that creates emotional chaos. Sophia Bennett learned this lesson during a period when her life looked highly successful from the outside. She was a marketing entrepreneur living in San Diego who managed multiple business projects at once. Her schedule was packed constantly: meetings, partnerships, networking events, content planning, online courses, travel opportunities, and side projects consumed nearly every hour of her week. She prided herself on being ambitious and productive, but internally, she felt increasingly disconnected and overwhelmed. Her attention constantly shifted between unfinished responsibilities. Even when she completed important goals, satisfaction disappeared quickly because her mind immediately jumped toward the next task waiting for her. She rarely felt present anywhere because part of her attention was always focused on something else she had not yet finished. The strange part was that Sophia genuinely cared about many of her goals. The problem was not lack of passion. The problem was lack of focus. She had convinced herself that doing more automatically meant living better. One afternoon, after forgetting an important dinner she had promised to attend with her parents, Sophia sat alone in her car feeling emotionally exhausted. She realized she had become so busy managing responsibilities that she no longer felt connected to the life she was trying to build. Everything felt rushed, fragmented, and emotionally scattered. That evening she began asking herself difficult questions. Which goals truly mattered to her? Which commitments genuinely improved her life? Which ambitions came from personal meaning? and which came from pressure, comparison, or fear of falling behind. The answers surprised her. Over the next several months, Sophia simplified her life intentionally. She reduced projects that drained her energy without adding real fulfillment. She stopped saying yes to every opportunity simply because it sounded impressive. She focused her attention on fewer priorities, but gave those priorities deeper energy and presence. As her life became simpler, something unexpected happened. Her stress decreased, but her effectiveness improved. She thought more clearly. She enjoyed her work more deeply. Her relationships strengthened because she became emotionally present again, instead of mentally divided all the time. This is one of the hidden truths about focus. Depth creates fulfillment far more often than endless expansion does. A person can chase many things and still feel empty, because scattered attention rarely creates meaningful connection. But when energy becomes focused, life begins feeling more intentional. Many people exhaust themselves trying to build a perfect life in every direction simultaneously. They fear missing opportunities, so they say yes to too much. They compare themselves to others constantly, so they overload themselves with goals that may not even align with their real values. Over time, this creates emotional noise because the mind loses clarity about what truly matters. Simplicity requires courage because it forces a person to choose. Choosing one direction often means releasing another. Focusing deeply on meaningful priorities means accepting that not every opportunity needs to be pursued. But this is where emotional freedom begins. A peaceful life is not built by constantly expanding responsibilities. It is built by aligning your time, energy, and attention with what genuinely matters to you. This also applies emotionally. Many people spend enormous energy worrying about opinions, trends, status, and comparisons that ultimately contribute very little to lasting happiness. But when priorities become clear, unnecessary distractions lose much of their power. Focus creates calmness because it removes internal conflict. The mind becomes quieter when it no longer tries to carry everything at once. Energy becomes stronger when it is directed intentionally, instead of scattered endlessly. At the end of life, people rarely regret simplifying distractions. They regret losing time, chasing things that never truly mattered deeply to them. Relationships, health, peace of mind, meaningful work, presence. These are often the things that remain valuable long after temporary achievements lose their emotional excitement. The simpler your priorities become, the clearer your life becomes. And clarity is one of the greatest forms of peace a person can experience. Chapter 13. Build quiet confidence without needing approval. One of the heaviest emotional burdens a person can carry is the constant need for approval. When self-worth depends on how others respond, life becomes emotionally unstable because other people's opinions are always changing. Praise creates temporary confidence, criticism creates insecurity, and comparison slowly erodes inner peace. A person begins shaping decisions around acceptance instead of truth, and over time their identity becomes controlled by external validation rather than internal clarity. Many people spend years trying to appear successful, attractive, intelligent, or impressive because they secretly fear not being enough. This fear often hides beneath ambition, perfectionism, people-pleasing, or the constant desire to be admired. From the outside, someone may look highly confident while internally depending heavily on approval to feel valuable. The problem with this kind of confidence is that it disappears whenever validation disappears. Quiet confidence is different. It does not demand attention. It does not constantly seek reassurance. It comes from knowing who you are without needing endless confirmation from the outside world. People with quiet confidence still appreciate encouragement and respect, but their emotional stability does not depend entirely on receiving it. Andrew Foster struggled with this for most of his adult life. He was a financial analyst living in Minneapolis, highly intelligent and hard-working, but deeply affected by how others perceived him. At work, he constantly overworked himself to gain recognition from supervisors. During conversations, he carefully adjusted his opinions depending on who he was speaking to. On social media, he spent far too much time comparing his life to others and seeking subtle forms of validation through attention and approval. Even small criticism affected him deeply. If someone seemed unimpressed or distant, His mind replayed the interaction repeatedly. He questioned himself constantly because much of his self-worth depended on external reactions. Although he appeared calm outwardly, internally, he lived with continuous emotional pressure. One evening after presenting a major financial report at work, Andrew noticed something unsettling. Several co-workers complimented his performance, yet one minor piece of criticism from a senior manager completely consumed his thoughts. Instead of appreciating the positive feedback, his mind became obsessed with the single negative comment. Driving home that night, he realized how exhausting it felt to depend so heavily on other people's approval for emotional stability. That realization stayed with him. Gradually, Andrew began paying attention to how often he shaped his behavior around validation. He noticed how frequently he sought reassurance before making decisions. He realized he often stayed silent about his true opinions because he feared rejection or disagreement. Deep down, he was not living from confidence. He was living from fear of disapproval. So he slowly began changing his relationship with himself. He spent less time comparing his life online. He stopped over-explaining himself constantly. He practiced making decisions based on personal values rather than outside approval. During conversations, he became more honest instead of automatically trying to please everyone. At first, this felt uncomfortable because he had spent years connecting acceptance with safety. But over time, something powerful happened. He became calmer emotionally. Criticism no longer controlled him as deeply because his identity stopped depending entirely on external praise. He discovered that confidence grows stronger when a person becomes comfortable disappointing others occasionally, in order to remain honest with themselves. Inner peace becomes impossible when your emotional state constantly depends on how others respond to you. The world is too unpredictable for that kind of stability. Opinions change, approval fades, trends shift. If self-worth is built entirely on outside validation, emotional peace will always feel fragile. Quiet confidence simplifies life because it removes the endless pressure to perform constantly for approval. A person no longer needs to prove their value in every conversation, argument, or social setting. They stop seeking constant recognition because they already feel grounded internally. This does not mean becoming arrogant or emotionally detached. Truly confident people are often humble because they are not desperately trying to defend their ego at every moment. They can listen without feeling threatened. They can admit mistakes without collapsing emotionally. They do not need to dominate every room because their worth does not depend on being the center of attention. Simplicity teaches that the more secure a person becomes internally, the less they need from the outside world to feel complete. Approval becomes appreciated but not necessary. Comparison loses much of its emotional power. Life becomes lighter because the mind is no longer constantly performing for validation. But real confidence usually grows through a quieter process. It grows when a person learns to trust their own values, accept their imperfections, and remain emotionally steady, even when approval is uncertain. Because the strongest kind of confidence is not loud, it is peaceful. It is the calm understanding that your worth does not rise and fall based on who applauds you, who criticizes you, or who chooses to notice you. Chapter 14. Lighten your life before stress consumes you. Many people carry far more than they were ever meant to hold, not only physically, but emotionally and mentally. Responsibilities pile up slowly over time. Obligations increase, expectations multiply, schedules become crowded, emotional burdens remain unspoken. At first, people convince themselves they can manage everything. They continue saying yes, continue pushing forward, continue ignoring exhaustion. But eventually, life begins to feel heavy in a way that rest alone cannot fix. A heavy life is not always caused by major tragedy. Sometimes it is created through years of overcommitment, emotional neglect, and constant pressure without enough space to recover. People become so used to carrying stress that they stop noticing how tense their minds and bodies have become. They wake up tired. They move through the day mentally overloaded. Even quiet moments feel restless because the nervous system no longer remembers how to fully relax. Modern life often rewards this kind of overload. Being busy is praised. Constant availability is expected. People feel guilty for resting because they fear appearing unproductive or irresponsible. As a result, many spend years living beyond their emotional limits while pretending everything is under control. Lauren Mitchell understood this exhaustion deeply. She was a restaurant manager living in Portland, responsible for long shifts, employee coordination, customer issues, and endless daily demands. Outside of work, she also carried family responsibilities, social obligations, and financial stress. Her calendar remained full constantly. Days moved quickly, but emotionally she felt trapped inside a cycle that never truly slowed down. At first, Lauren believed stress was simply part of adulthood. She kept pushing herself because everyone around her seemed equally overwhelmed. But gradually, the pressure started affecting every part of her life. Small inconveniences triggered emotional reactions. She lost patience easily. Sleep became inconsistent. Even during her free time, her mind remained tense because she constantly worried about unfinished responsibilities. One evening after returning home from an exhausting shift, Lauren sat quietly in her apartment staring at her planner, filled with upcoming commitments. Looking at the crowded schedule suddenly made her feel emotionally suffocated. For the first time, she admitted something she had avoided for years. She had built a life so full of obligations that there was almost no room left for peace. That realization changed the way she viewed simplicity. Lauren began examining every part of her life honestly. Which responsibilities were truly necessary? Which commitments came from guilt instead of genuine importance? Which habits were adding emotional pressure without improving her well-being? Slowly, she started making difficult but healthy changes. She stopped volunteering for every extra responsibility at work. She reduced social obligations that left her emotionally drained. She learned how to say no respectfully, instead of automatically saying yes out of fear of disappointing people. At first, this felt uncomfortable because she had spent years believing her value depended on how much she could handle. But over time, something remarkable happened. The more she simplified her life, the calmer she became emotionally. Her mind felt lighter, her patience returned. Small moments of joy became noticeable again, because she was no longer emotionally buried beneath constant pressure. This is one of the most important truths about peaceful living. A person cannot continuously overload themselves and still expect to feel emotionally balanced. Stress itself is not always the problem. Human beings can handle difficult seasons when recovery, meaning, and emotional balance exist alongside responsibility. The real danger comes when pressure becomes constant and the mind never receives enough space to breathe. Eventually, even strong people begin feeling emotionally numb, anxious, or exhausted because they have been carrying too much for too long. Simplicity teaches you to pay attention to emotional weight before it becomes overwhelming. A crowded schedule may impress others while quietly destroying your peace. Endless obligations may create the appearance of productivity, while internally draining your emotional health. This is why learning to say no is so important. Every yes carries a cost: time, energy, attention, emotional capacity. Peaceful people understand this clearly. They do not give their energy away carelessly because they know exhaustion often begins with too many unnecessary commitments. A lighter life is not an irresponsible life. It is an intentional one. It means creating enough space inside your days to think clearly, rest properly, and reconnect with yourself emotionally. It means understanding that your well-being deserves protection too. Many people wait until burnout forces them to slow down, but wisdom learns earlier. It recognizes when life has become too crowded emotionally and begins simplifying before stress completely takes over. Because peace cannot grow in a life that leaves no room for breathing. And sometimes the most healing decision a person can make is not adding something new, but finally releasing what has been weighing them down for far too long. Chapter 15. Choose peace every single day. Peace is not something that suddenly appears after life becomes perfect. It is not waiting at the end of achievement, success, wealth, or complete certainty. Peace is built through daily choices, often small and quiet ones, that seem insignificant in the moment. The decision to slow down instead of rushing unnecessarily. The decision to protect your attention instead of feeding constant distraction. The decision to let go of emotional chaos instead of carrying it endlessly. Over time, These small choices shape the emotional atmosphere of an entire life. Many people imagine peaceful living as a destination they will eventually reach someday. They tell themselves they will finally relax once certain problems disappear or certain goals are accomplished. But life rarely becomes completely free from difficulty. Responsibilities continue, unexpected situations happen, stressful seasons come and go. If peace depends entirely on external perfection, it will always remain temporary and fragile. True peace works differently. It is practiced, it is protected intentionally, it grows slowly through awareness, discipline, and emotional clarity. A peaceful person is not someone who avoids all problems. It is someone who has learned how to move through life without allowing every problem to dominate their inner world. This is why simplicity matters so deeply. Simplicity creates room for peace to exist. A crowded mind struggles to feel calm. A distracted life struggles to feel meaningful. Endless comparison destroys gratitude. Constant urgency weakens emotional balance. But when a person intentionally removes unnecessary noise, pressure, distraction, and emotional clutter, something remarkable begins happening internally. The mind becomes lighter, thoughts become clearer, life becomes more present. Peaceful living also requires repetition, because human beings naturally drift back toward chaos when they stop paying attention. Distractions slowly return. Overcommitment quietly increases. Emotional habits reappear. This is why peace must become a daily practice rather than a temporary mood. Every day requires small acts of awareness. Every day requires intentional choices about what deserves your energy and what does not. There will be seasons when life feels balanced and calm naturally. There will also be seasons filled with uncertainty, disappointment, grief, or pressure. During difficult moments, simplicity becomes even more important because the mind needs stability when life feels emotionally heavy. A peaceful person understands something many people overlook. Not every problem deserves complete emotional possession. Some situations require action, others require acceptance. Wisdom grows when a person learns the difference. Choosing peace also means learning how to release unnecessary emotional battles. The need to prove yourself constantly, the need to win every argument, the need to control every outcome, the need to compare your life endlessly against someone else's version of success. These patterns quietly drain emotional energy for years without creating lasting fulfillment. A simpler life often reveals that many things people desperately chase do not actually create deep happiness. Attention fades, status changes, possessions lose excitement, external validation comes and goes, but inner calm creates a different kind of richness. It allows a person to enjoy ordinary moments fully, a quiet morning, a meaningful conversation, a calm evening walk, a peaceful home. These experiences begin feeling valuable again when the mind is no longer overwhelmed by constant noise. Peaceful living does not require escaping modern life completely. It simply requires becoming more intentional within it. You can still pursue meaningful goals. You can still work hard, grow, and build a successful future. Simplicity is not about rejecting ambition. It is about refusing to sacrifice your mental and emotional well-being in the process. There is great strength in becoming calmer in a world that constantly pushes people toward stress, distraction, and emotional overload. A calm mind thinks more clearly. A peaceful heart responds more wisely. A simple life creates room for gratitude, focus, connection, and emotional freedom. At the end of life, people rarely wish they had spent more time rushing, comparing, overworking, or carrying unnecessary emotional weight. They wish they had been more present, more connected, more peaceful. They wish they had protected the simple moments that truly mattered, instead of constantly postponing happiness for another future achievement. This is why peace must be chosen daily, not once, not occasionally, every single day. Because the quality of your life is shaped not only by what you achieve, but by the emotional state you carry while moving through it. And sometimes the greatest transformation begins when a person finally decides that protecting their peace is no longer optional but essential. Conclusion: a peaceful life is not built through accident, luck, or perfect circumstances. It is built through awareness, through intentional choices repeated quietly over time. Throughout this journey, you have seen how simplicity reaches far deeper than possessions or routines. It shapes the condition of the mind, the quality of relationships, the way attention is used, and the emotional atmosphere surrounding everyday life. The modern world constantly pushes people toward noise, more pressure, more speed, more comparison, more distraction. Many people spend years chasing success, while slowly losing connection with themselves in the process. They become mentally crowded, emotionally exhausted, and spiritually restless without fully understanding why. Yet peace was never hiding in more complexity. It was waiting in clarity all along. Simplicity does not ask you to abandon ambition or stop growing. It asks you to grow with intention, to stop filling your life with things, obligations, distractions, and emotional burdens that quietly weaken your inner world. A simpler life creates room for deeper focus, stronger relationships, healthier emotions, and a calmer mind. It allows you to experience life, instead of constantly racing through it. You have learned that protecting your attention protects your peace, that calm communication strengthens relationships, that unnecessary possessions often create unnecessary pressure, that boundaries are essential for emotional health, that routines can steady the mind, that trying to control everything only creates anxiety, and perhaps most importantly, you have seen that peace must be practiced consistently, rather than postponed for some perfect future moment. This truth matters deeply because life moves quickly, days become years faster than people expect, and many individuals spend too much of their lives distracted by things that will never truly fulfill them. Endless comparison steals gratitude, endless busyness steals presence, endless consumption steals contentment, but simplicity gently brings a person back to what actually matters: a quiet morning with a clear mind, a meaningful conversation without distraction, time spent with people who bring calmness instead of chaos, work that feels aligned with your values, moments where you can breathe deeply without feeling emotionally overwhelmed. These experiences may appear ordinary from the outside, but they often create the deepest forms of happiness. Peaceful living also requires courage, because simplicity is not always encouraged by the world around you. Many people will continue chasing exhaustion because busyness feels socially rewarded. Others will continue accumulating more because consumption feels temporarily exciting. Some will stay emotionally overwhelmed because slowing down forces them to finally confront what they have been avoiding internally. But a simpler path creates a different kind of life, one that feels lighter instead of heavier, clearer instead of crowded, intentional instead of reactive. There will still be difficult days, stressful seasons will still come, life will continue changing in unexpected ways. Simplicity does not remove every challenge from human existence. What it changes is the way you move through those challenges. A calm mind responds differently than a chaotic one. A grounded person recovers differently than an emotionally overloaded one. Peace creates resilience, because the mind is no longer constantly fighting unnecessary battles. As you move forward from this audiobook, remember that transformation rarely happens through one dramatic moment. It happens through repeated small choices, choosing rest when your mind needs silence, choosing boundaries when relationships become emotionally draining, choosing focus instead of distraction, choosing gratitude instead of endless comparison, choosing presence instead of constant urgency. These decisions may appear small in isolation, but together they shape the quality of an entire life. The art of simplicity is ultimately the art of protecting what truly matters: your attention, your peace, your energy, your time, your emotional well-being. Once those things are lost carelessly, life begins feeling heavy. But when they are protected intentionally, life begins feeling meaningful again. And perhaps the greatest lesson of all is this: peace is not something you find somewhere far away. It is something you create within yourself, one simple choice at a time.